Hey YouTube, welcome back. I've got another build here for you. This is the result of another Vision GL weekend tournament. This was the Lich weekend tournament, and every single skill was on the table. So during these weekend tournaments, you get to choose one of 3 or 4 skills, build your character around it, and then push as far in the arena as possible. For this weekend, one of the weekend skills was Death Seal, which basically means you can play whatever you want. Because if you're playing a Lich that doesn't have Death Seal, you're not going to have damage, and you're just missing out on a significant portion of offense and defense, and kind of one of the most important parts of the Lich's toolkit. You can play a ward-based build, I suppose, but until I see a good convincing one of those that I can also put together in a weekend tournament, those are kind of off the table for me. So for this weekend, we did use Death Seal, so that's great. And for a very, very long time, I didn't know what to play. And at the very last minute, maybe an hour before I did my final push, I changed my build, I started playing Soul Feast instead, and I got to wave 420 in the arena in Hardcore Solo, and we are now at the very top, rank 1, not only of the weekend, but of the entire ladder overall. So the story of this weekend tournament, we didn't really know what to play. The Lich meta hasn't really changed much recently. And one of my favorite builds is from someone in the community named MauMauX, and he plays a Rip Blood Transplant Crit Necrotic build using the supported unique item Marina's Lost Soul. That's the build that I was leveling up with. I played it 3 out of 4 days for the weekend tournament, and I didn't really have the inspiration to play anything else instead. But here's the thing, there was somebody in my Twitch chat who kept telling me about Soul Feast. He's like, oh man, you gotta unspec Transplant, you gotta spec your Hungering Souls, you gotta use Soul Feast. So from my perspective, I've never really heard anything good about Soul Feast. It's super tanky, it caps your armor, and it does no damage. So this person kept telling me like, oh, my Soul Feast build's really good, my Soul Feast build is really good, and his name is Amun, so we're gonna go take a look at the softcore solo ladder here. He got 593 waves in softcore. And he's like, my build's really good, you should play it. My build's really good, you should play it. And you know what? Damn, we tried playing his build. It's cracked. Chat, it's a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. It's buttery smooth. I don't know if there's a compelling reason to play it outside of Arena, but in Arena, it absolutely shines with the cooldowns, the armor, all the parts of the build working together well. Not having to use your Transplant to go in, you can play more defensively, you have much more range than like a Transplant Rip Blood build that I would normally play. And the build just feels super, super good. Let's talk about the build that we played here. I'm going to link both my planner for the character that I put together here, and then I'm going to link to you the planner that I think is Amun's current character. I'll link you both of those things so you can see what I was referencing and then what I ended up with. So for our character, we are playing a Crit Necrotic build. One of the cool things about Marina's Lost Soul is that it has spell necrotic damage. It does not have adaptive damage. So regardless of the element or the tag of whatever skill you're using, you're going to be putting necrotic damage onto that. And we actually make use of it, which is pretty cool. So we have our Marinas here. If you played a Lich in the past, you know that some of these skills just don't have base critical strike chance, so it's nice to use an offhand that has this +6. So your base is 5, +6 is 11, and we even have a Prismatic Gaze. It's not required, but it feels really good to have +3 or even +4 additional critical strike chance to help you push all the way up to 70 or 80% crit without going crazy with copper rings, for example, trying to get crit chances implicit there. So those two things feel good. We have the Catalyst here, and then we have a Grimoire of Necrotic Elixirs. Grimoire. This thing's excellent. It just does everything you want. It gives you flat life with Vitality. It gives you defense with less void, necrotic, and poison damage taken when you use a potion. And then it gives you flat necrotic damage to spells and melee attacks as well. So every time that I play a Lich, I just put this in my build. It turns my potions into like a defensive Path of Exile style potion. And I love using Grimoire. I think it's just like a really nice thing. It also has a very low LP level, so finding one with 1, 2, or even 3 LP is a pretty easy thing to do. So especially getting one with 1 LP and then trying to slam on whatever your tier 6 modifier is a pretty realistic thing to do during a weekend tournament. So those are the highlights of unique items. let's talk about skills first, and then we'll go through the rest of the build. Let's talk about Soul Feast. One of my biggest reservations about Soul Feast is I just didn't know how to spec it. I've never seen a Soul Feast build. I've seen one from like 2.5 years ago or so, way before I started playing. I've heard people tell me about it, but I never really knew what I was supposed to do. So I've seen people play like Cone Area of Effect no longer requires a curse, but the way that we're playing it, we're using Soul Feast along with Bone Curse. So it's kinda like a 2-button build. But we can Bone Curse once, and then we can Soul Feast, boom, 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 mana permitting. So the most important parts about this are these first 4 nodes right here. This Hunger, this is cast speed and mana efficiency. This thing costs a lot of mana, and getting the mana cost down to 10 feels great. So we have all 4 points here. We have only 1 more damage multiplier. So we're going to take all 4 points here, 120% more damage. And then we got these 3 points here for, again, more mana efficiency and some plus maximum targets. I guess we need the maximum targets. It feels pretty good. I wouldn't go out of my way to get other maximum targets, because when you're using Soul Feast, you're going to kill something, and then the next Soul Feast is going to be targeting something else. So it's really no big deal. The last portion of the build, I've seen some people travel up to the top right to get this mana from rares or bosses. And instead of doing this, we've trimmed it out. We're using mana regeneration to deal with Soul Feast. We have about 19 or 20 mana regeneration, but we'll talk about that later. We're coming down to the bottom left to get this extremely meta Soul Feast armor stacking thing. So you could get more damage out of this by using a Thought Corrosion, and this would give you a bunch of poison converted into Armor Shred and give you some more damage. But I'm using this to get 85% armor against enemies, which is just ludicrous. So we get basically infinite armor, and this feels real good in Arena, especially along with being a Lich, using Death Seal, using Grimoire, using our Mastery to get less damage taken from various sources. And then we have these couple nodes, which I actually think are pretty important. Having Haste in the build with near perfect uptime, this feels excellent, believe it or not, even though we don't have a Quicksilver Ring or any other source of haste. And then this last node here, again, it kind of looks innocuous. You wouldn't say that this is like the standout of the build. The fact that I'm using a unique weapon that doesn't have chill as a suffix means that I can take this and I can have a 100% chance to chill on hit with my Soul Feast. And then this chill, along with a guaranteed slow from Bone Curse, means that I can kite really well in Arena because of the guaranteed chill and the guaranteed slow that I don't even need to use my weapon suffixes for, so I can use a very strong unique weapon like Marina's Lost Soul. Let's move on from Soul Feast. We're going to talk about the second damaging portion of the build. We've got Hungering Souls here. We're only proccing this off of Death Seal with these nodes in the very top right of Death Seal, and then 5 points in the frequency as well, just to make it cast more often when we have Death Seal turned on, right? So Hungering Souls, we only have 1 big hit. We're kind of using this for single target because my Soul Feast has excellent AoE, and it's just going to kill a bunch of small trash monsters. So Hungering Souls is my single target damage. We've got a bunch of damage if you have at least 1 minion. We have a bunch of damage if you have 3 minions. We're using Vanguard, chance to create a Vanguard on kill from a couple sources, but we'll talk about that. And then we have plus base crit, some crit multi. These nodes here for hit damage. And then I want to call out this point real quick. This is this Fire Skull node. It converts Hungering Souls into fire damage, but it only converts the base damage. So if I had adaptive damage on my wand, then this would become like a bunch of fire adaptive from my wand added to Hungering Souls. But because Marina's is a bunch of spell necrotic damage as the implicit and spell necrotic damage as the explicit, I can actually take this node, which gives me 50% more damage for just 1 point, and I can still make use of it. So if you're using Marina's, you get to take this. The rest of this, we just have a couple points over here for this spell necrotic damage, just for some flats. You could also grab this necromantic emanation if you wanted to for another more multiplier. You're only going to have 2 or 3 minions at any given point in time, but I suppose that's another more multi if you're up for it. Alright, so we talked about 3 skills. Let's talk about Death Seal as well. If you haven't seen Death Seal before, I feel like we could make an entire video on it, but let's talk about the base real quick, and then we'll talk about what we're actually spec'd for. So what does Death Seal do? If you're just like a brand new Lich player and you've never seen it before, it says you turn it on and you get more damage per missing health and then less damage taken per missing health. We want to be missing health. That's why we take this node on the very far left. So it says if our health is above 33%, it becomes 33%. So by default, we get a bunch of more damage and then less damage taken. And then we also get percent increased damage per missing health. And then we get flat armor per flat missing health. So we want to have 3,000 life. We want to be very healthy with vitality and stuff. We get stun mitigation, I suppose. We have some poison chance here, which is important because we want poison chance to go along with soul feast, these nodes on the very bottom left. We want just a tiny bit of poison chance to help enable this. And then we have 3 points into making this last as long as possible. We're proccing Hungering Souls, like we said before, some extra frequency. And then we have 1 little point in the Death Wave, just to make this thing pulse and deal some damage around us while we have Death Seal turned on. This helps to just kill trash monsters that are swarming around us, so it feels good. And believe it or not, I even got a question here in Twitch chat today saying, hey, what does Reaper Form do? Let's talk about the base skill, and then we'll talk about how we've spec'd it here. So by default, what does Reaper Form do? It doubles your life total. That's it. You have 3,000 life, and then when you turn on Reaper Form, you have a transformation with 3,000 life, and then when you die in Reaper Form, you go back to human form. So it gives you another, double your life total on top of what you already have. That's the default. I guess it also gives you a movement skill too, which is cute. But the most common things that you see people use Reaper Form for are these nodes in the very top, which give you percent increased damage, crit, some movement speed, and attack and cast speed. So these nodes are very, very common. On top of that, very often you'll see people use Reaper Form in order to grab these nodes down here. Some flat necrotic damage, and maybe 50 crit multi. These points are very common. Sometimes you see people take Mark for Death, but that's the 2 big standout portions of the Reaper Form skill tree. If you're a poison build, you're interested in the very bottom left of the build. For me, I actually took these nodes on the top right, specifically because I wanted poison resistance. You'll see on my build, I actually have no poison res at all, and it was kind of tedious to get poison res onto my character. So I just took this node instead, and along the way, I got some extra armor, flat armor per point of intelligence, which helps me when I'm in Reaper Form and I don't have Death Seal turned on, or it helps me when I'm not using Soul Feast all the time. That's what Reaper Form does. So this node here in Bone Curse, combined with our 2 points in the Mastery, give us a 20% chance to have a Vanguard on kill, which is appropriate for even above 400 waves in the arena. It just means that we can have this extra damage coming in from Hungering Souls, the Unholy Trinity node. The rest of Bone Curse is pretty straightforward. We are getting as much mana efficiency and cast speed as possible because we kind of have some trouble with our mana, so we want all 4 points here. We said before that Soul Feast having a chill on it, 100% chance to chill on hit, goes really well with the slow on hit from Bone Curse. And then we have as much area as possible, just because we want to make sure that enemies are actually cursed. And then we have some extra marked for death, which reduces enemies' resistance by 25. Lasts a little bit longer, these nodes down here. I think this is just about the right way to spec it. Honestly, the passives are just 10 out of 10. They're spectacular. Every node feels good to take. It's hard to go wrong, right? So anytime that you're looking at a passive, you basically want more than 7% damage per point. 7% increased damage per point, or even these nodes here with 6% increased damage per point, is pretty unspectacular. It's not great. So anything that's better than that is worthwhile, especially if it comes with an additional benefit. So for me, I'm stacking up intelligence because I wanted my intelligence to become poison res, and my intelligence also becomes flat armor. So that's why we opted into these, because this is 2 intelligence per point, which is 8% increased damage. It's slightly better than 7. So that's the rationale that you're going to see going into this. So the base Acolyte class, instead of grabbing percent increased damage, we've got some extra armor. Then we have all the intelligence, necrotic res, and vitality to keep us nice and healthy with the 20 points here. There's not much overlap between Lich and Necromancer, so we have no points in Necromancer at all. You could get some attack and cast speed and some flat health from Hunger here, but for me, I think all the points here are exactly what I want. So I'm not sure that I would want to take this. 10% cast speed's fine, but yeah. For the Lich skill tree itself, we have a bunch of intelligence and mana regeneration. We're actually using mana regen to cope with the high mana cost of Soul Feast and how often we want to spam it with cast speed. So we have 19 mana regeneration. I think 18 would be like the floor. 19 or 20 feels pretty good though. Let's go back to this. We have some percent increased damage while at low life. I guess it's percent increased damage and then tripled when at low life. So we have 2 points here into Vanguard. We have some generic penetration for ourselves. Remember, all of our damage is necrotic. We've got a tiny bit of fire damage, but we're ignoring that. So all of our necrotic penetration is coming in here. We have some crit chance, cast speed, crit chance, crit multi, and then I think it's worthwhile to talk about this elixir of death every time that we play a lich build. When you click on your potion, like, yeah, you're going to be draining your current health 8% per second. I actually don't have a potion right now. Whoops. So you will be draining your life 8% per second when you're using this elixir of death, but having that huge less damage taken from elixir of death, along with something like Grimoire, giving you that 37% less void, necrotic, and poison damage taken from this item, and then having less damage taken from Death Seal as well, and having your second life bar from Reaper form, and then having yourself right next to your endurance threshold so that you have endurance kicking in as well. There's a lot of sources of less and reduced damage taken that feels just really good. I'm always kind of surprised when I hear people say that Lich doesn't feel good in hardcore, or like Lich is too squishy. You have so many defensive layers. Some of them rely on a cooldown, but you have a lot of player agency when you're playing around with these things and making decisions about when to go in, when to retreat, when to kite, or when to just go ham. So nodes like this feel great. Last couple nodes here are cast speed, movement speed, damage releases health, and then Soul Maw, which is like one of the most important nodes. It just gives you a tremendous amount of leech per point, and then the increased leech just means that you're going to leech back faster. I pointed out the 3 unique items / legendary items that we were already using. The other things that we have here are vitality, intelligence, health, and health. Just trying to get as much life as we possibly can on our chest piece. For our amulets, it's not great, but I really needed as much mana regen as I could get in this build because I pivoted really late into the weekend. Of course, you would want something like crit multi or necrotic damage, or even spell critical strike chance as the other prefix modifier there. So my physical damage prefix is wasted, but the rest of this is what you'd be looking for. While I was playing a Rip Blood build, I was using this instead before I pivoted over to Soul Feast. It's a spell crit multi, LE, frailty, so kind of the same thing, but a bit better, just because I had been using this more before I swapped over to a mana hungry build. For our offhand catalyst, we're looking for spell crit chance, crit multi. The most important part of an offhand catalyst, honestly, is the implicit. Just looking for that +6, because it rolls from +3 to +6 spell crit chance. That's base crit chance as well. If you're a Path of Exile player, you're familiar with that. This is important enough that in my loot filter, I oftentimes have a rule that looks like this, that just has a show all for every crystal skull. So even if it's a white item on the ground early on in the weekend, day 1 or day 2, if I can find one that's white with no text on it, but it has a 6 as the implicit, I'm probably going to pick it up and try to use it. Rest of our gear, it should be things like cast speed, crit chance, or intelligence wherever possible. We take a look at the rings as well. For our boots, we're looking for as much life and movement speed as we can, making sure that we have a high endurance to go along with our endurance threshold. Got to make sure that we cap our critical strike avoidance, and hopefully that we can also make room for having some unique items like this in our relic slot. For the idols, while we were playing Rip Blood, we had very specific idols, and we had very well rolled idols as well. So these things, cooldown recovery speed with transplant, using all of these along with cooldown recovery speed on your helmet gets you down to about 2.5-ish seconds on your transplant cooldown, which means you can just Goomba stomp very, very often. So those feel great. However, once we swapped over to playing Soul Feast instead, we didn't need transplant cooldown recovery speed because we were kiting much more often. And we can just stay back. We don't need to ever go in. We can just kite and stay away from the enemy. So instead, we have these idols, things like Health Res, Health Fear on Hit. Having at least one of these felt extremely good during the arena push. So I think I would recommend at least one of these Fear on Hit idols to you as well. And then other than that, just life, double life idols, life res, filling in whatever resistances you need, and getting over 3,000 life seems pretty easy to me. If you were using a real helmet instead of a prismatic gaze, you could have like 3,700 life, I'm sure of it. The very last thing that we'll talk about here will be the blessings. We have Necrotic Shred, which is pretty important, just to make sure that we can continue doing big damage. Remember, all of our damage is going to be necrotic, even though we have fire hungering souls, because we're using a bunch of flat necrotic instead of flat fire or flat adaptive. We have percent armor coming in from Hayrot, some crit avoidance, shock on hit helps us to stun enemies. So I think this is a pretty good use of this. You don't really need lightning resistance on this build from Laggin, because you can just pick up lightning resistance on a idol like this, or maybe some all res from an idol like this as well. Having this be shock and be like kind of a aggressive modifier, offensive modifier, I think is a better use of it. And then we don't really need void res because we can get it from other sources. We can get like exalted modifiers, we can get it on our idols, we can get it somewhere else, but I think crit multi is is exactly what you want from Raye's blessing here. So I think the last thing to say is not so much about the what we've done with this specific character, but just talking a little bit more about Marina's. While I was playing the Rip Blood build, I actually used my blessings in a different way. I still had shock, which I intentionally farmed up. It took me like 2 or 3 kills in order to get shock from this, but I wanted shock here to make up for the fact that I was using a unique weapon that didn't have suffixes on it. So I couldn't get like shock, chill, slow, things like that. And then I was actually using Age of Winter for chance to chill on hit instead. So I wanted chill in the build, like chill, slow, shock. These things are really good in order to slow down the enemies, CC them, get them away from you while you're doing your arena pushes. So I was actually using chill on hit as my blessing here, which I've never done before. But again, as soon as we started using Soul Feast, the fact that Soul Feast has this chill built into it, and the fact that Bone Curse has this slow built into it, meant that I didn't need that anymore, and that I could swap over my blessing to being percent armor instead. To me, it's super interesting, and I like how this build worked out. Again, at the beginning of this weekend, I didn't really know what build I was going to play, just kind of, played something that I'd done before, the Rip Blood Transplant Goomba Stomp build. I'm glad that I took the recommendation from somebody in chat and actually tried Soul Feast for the first time. And I love it. I think it's really good. It's totally a different playstyle. It's really smooth, and it's got enough damage when you bake in the Hungering Souls from Deathseal off it. So that's the build. Hope you like it. Again, if you ever have any questions about this, you can leave those in the comment section of this YouTube video here, or you can drop by Twitch at twitch.tv/FairyThePig, where I stream almost every day, either doing some of these races or even doing one of our podcasts, which is every week on Friday, along with Dread from Epoch Builds. So, chat, thanks for being here. Appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.